with your girl Toya, and this episode is called The 4 Quarters of Focus. So boom, let me tell you how we got here. So I'm thinking about what I wanted Universal Teas to look like for 2023. And I had 1,001,000 different ideas for what I wanted it to look like, things that I wanted to do, where I wanted it to go. And even in my life in general, I'm just realizing I'm coming into the tail end of like a tunnel of transformation, if you will. And so coming out of this tunnel, I'm thinking about everything that I want to do next, right? My mind is a little clearer. My intentions are a little clearer. But I've realized through my therapist, who also brought this to my attention, that I have to focus. I have to focus on something, on one thing. And then everything else will fall into place. And so I realized that would be the word, the focus for my podcast this year would be focus. And so I broke it down into 4 quarters that are going to spread throughout the year. And the first quarter that I came up with was plan. So there's 4 P words. I should have told y'all that. There's 4 P words that I'm using to represent these 4 quarters. The first one is plan, then it's proceed, then it's produce, and then it's provide. And so in my mind, and I'm going to go through what each of these words means and why I kind of wanted to hang on to this for Universal Teas. But when focusing is a process, and you kind of have to map it out and plan it out and know exactly what these things are going to look like. So focusing for me is focusing on my greater good. And that's what I challenge you all to focus on, is what's going to make you better, what's going to propel you forward, not just in one thing, but in every avenue of life and relationship and work and business and self-esteem and self-love. You have to find your focus. And I also realized that I would get focus and intention. I would kind of use them interchangeably. Just because you set an intention with something, that's not what the focus is. And it's crazy because the definition actually comes up. Not the definition, child. The word intention actually comes up in the definition of one of the quarters. So I'm just going to run y'all through those, and y'all are going to see and feel what the energy for 2023 in Universal Teas is going to look like all together. So let's do this like who Brutus, period. Okay, so plan. That is the first quarter. So quarter 1 of this year, which will be now until the end of March, is plan. And so when I looked at the definition of the word plan, like what is a plan? You can't plan unless you've planned for the plan. We're going to break it down. Don't worry about it. So a plan is a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. And the word that stood out to me when I talk about plan, or when I think about planning, is the word detailed. When you are planning to be better, to do better, to achieve more, you have to be detailed and specific. When you plan to be closer to God, and this is something that I've realized, planning has to be detailed. Right? Because you get what you ask for. When we're talking about manifesting is a form of planning, and I'm not going to get into the episode because I'm just running through what they're going to look like. Planning is a form of manifesting, and you have to get really clear and detailed in your manifestations, right? So I feel like in this first 3 months of the year, I want us to focus on making clear, detailed plans for what it is that we want to do, what we want to become, how we want to be perceived, right? And then the second definition for plan that I thought stood out to me was an intention. Told y'all that word was coming up. About what one is doing. So a large part of planning, and this is something that I love to talk about, is intention. Having and operating with and in intention is so important. And so this first couple of months of the year, I want us to get very intentional. I want our intentions to be clear, because we make plans, right? We set what I call soft intentions when we make New Year's resolutions. It's something that sounds good, right? That would be a good idea, but you haven't really set an intention on why that's important to you. So we're going to talk about that coming up ASAP. Then quarter 2, which is the second part of the year, the word for that is proceed. right? To go forth with. The word proceed means to begin or continue a course of action. So we've written our plans and now we're moving down to actually being in a course of action of doing. Because I've noticed with myself in particular, because baby, I'm going to tell y'all what I got to tell y'all. When we are having these grand dreams and these wants and these desires, we plan, right? But we're not backing it with action. Right? For my Christians in the room, faith without work is dead. So you have to plan appropriately. And then the next step I felt like after that was the word proceed, which means to go forth in action. Right? We sometimes get stuck in this cycle of planning and we never execute. So then we're going to push ourselves, myself included. These are my 4 quarters of focus as well. We're going to push ourselves into the action that comes along with it. Another definition that stood out to me for the word proceed, which is quarter 2, is to move forward, especially after reaching a certain point. And that stood out to me because it says you're not able to proceed until you've reached a certain point. And so I know for some of us, and I'm y'all know I'm gonna say what I gotta say. As it comes to me, sometimes we have to hit rock bottom where we don't have a choice except for to proceed, except for to go forward. Sometimes we have to get into a place where we're at a certain point and we have no choice but to proceed. Okay? The last definition of the word proceed that stood out to me is to do something as a natural or seemingly inevitable next step. Same as last time. It's an inevitable next step. You've planned so much. You've studied so much. You've learned so much. You've prepared yourself so much. You now have to proceed. There's nothing else for you to do but proceed. And when we talk about transformation, and I'm going to get into this when we get to this portion, when we talk about transforming and changing, and even me learning through my own transformation, we have to get to a point where we gotta proceed. We gotta move forward. Right? The teacher has to become, I'm sorry, I was about to lie to y'all. The student has to become the teacher at some point. What's the point of learning and growing and studying and training and mastering things and getting degrees and fulfilling all of these, checking all of these boxes off if you never go forward with the next step? Stop allowing yourself to get stuck in a cycle, whether it be a big cycle or something small. But you have to know that there's a point where you have to cross the threshold. And that's what quarter 2 is going to be for all of us, is to proceed, to step across that threshold into what is to be. Right? Leads me to quarter 3. Quarter 3, we making some shit shake. So the word that I have for quarter 3 is produce. We've planned, right? We've prepared ourselves. We've proceeded with the actions. Now we're physically doing the work. We're doing the tangible work. And then produce means to make or manufacture from components of raw materials. And I might be going a little left. But when I heard that, to make or manufacture from the components of raw materials, sometimes you have to be stripped down to your rawest form. When you're focused, sometimes being focused means being put in the most uncomfortable position where you feel raw, where you feel open and exposed. And now you have no choice but to pull from, because it says the components of raw materials. You're pulling from all the parts of your life when you just felt exposed and raw and open in order to create something from that. So in the produce era, we're actually basking in our gifts. We're basking in our talents. It's harvest season, if you will. This is where you start to see. This is where you start to see the fruits of your labor. Right? And I'm going to get into the details of that, and I'm going to get into what makes all of that important. And so in the section quarter 3, I think that's the most important, because that's when we're most fulfilled in our lives, is understanding that the work that I did paid off. The tears paid off. The pain paid off. The heartbreak paid off. Losing the job paid off. The hard lessons pay off, because when you proceed and you're doing that action, it won't always be easy. You're not going to want to always complete the action. But when you get to that produce stage, when you start to see the manifestations, when you start to feel the blessings around you and you start to bask in all the hard work that you've done, it's going to be worth it, right? There's another definition for the word produce that I have, to create or form something as a part of a physical process. Growing is hard. Growing is painful. And so when we're in this stage to proceed, that's where the growth happens. You're doing things that aren't necessarily comfortable. Maybe starting this business, starting a podcast, writing a book, doing what you have to do that has really been planted inside of you by God. Proceeding with that is difficult. So when we talk about things that we produce, this is something that comes from a physical process. Because physically, I had to train harder. Physically, I had to get myself out of bed more. Physically, I had to make sacrifices and I had to let go of some things. But when you're in the stage of producing, you're seeing all of the fruits of your labor. So that's why that's important. And then the last definition for the word produced that I came up with, or not that I came up with, child, Webster, no. Because I don't write definitions. I just be looking them up, child. But anyway, the last definition for the word produce that stood out to me was to make something using creative or mental skill. And don't think surface level with these definitions, y'all. They're saying to make something using creative or mental skill. Here's a mental skill that is very real for me, and I know it's real for a lot of people. Pulling yourself out of depression. That takes mental skill. So you produce somebody who's not depressed anymore. A mental skill, something that takes you what? Focus. That's why we're talking about focus, because all of these words hone in on something you have to be focused on. And when we're talking about the quarter of production or producing, we need to make sure that we're understanding that these are the fruits of things that we've did. These are the fruits of our creative or mental skills. We've built ourselves up for this. When you go run a marathon, you've built yourself up for that. You now have the physical skills to show or to finish this marathon. You know what I mean? You go to college long enough, they send you into the world because you now have the skills, the mental skills to work in that career. So the era of production is where we get to be proud of ourselves, right? We get to be proud of ourselves and we get to clap for ourselves and we get to pat ourselves on the back because we did all the work in the dark, and this is the exposure. Okay? So that's quarter 3. We're producing. So far we got plan, produce, proceed, plan, proceed, produce. Okay? So quarter 4, the last part of the year, the word for that is provide. And the reason that I chose the word provide is because once we've done the work to get over the threshold of fear, of anxiety, of doubt, of generational curses, once we've crossed that threshold and we start to see that we can do it, we can see that we're better, that we're smarter, that we're faster, that we're stronger, right? Whether it be mentally strong, physically strong, emotionally strong, when we see that, it's important for us to now share it or provide other people with those things that helped us to get there. That is why I do this podcast. I'm providing you all with what you need because I know what it's like to be in some of the mental spaces that other people have been in. I know that I wanted to call this podcast Universal Teas because that is me providing. And wait till I say the definitions of the word provide. It's going to make a little more sense and it's going to click a little bit more. But let's get into those definitions. So provide, it means to equip or supply someone with something useful or necessary. So when you provide, that means that now since I've been through my journey, since I've gone through my transformation, since I've gone through my 4 quarters of focus, I can now give the tools that somebody else might need. This is useful. Me being on this platform is useful to somebody who may be in a different phase, who may be in a different quarter of life than me. So the provide is so important. You can't just, and I'm not going to say you can't, but you shouldn't just harbor your gifts. You shouldn't harbor your talents. You shouldn't harbor your blessings. That's not what they were given to you for. God gives us gifts so that we can share them, so we can provide use and light and motivation to other people. So make sure that when we're in that quarter, I'm talking like tangible providing, like service projects. And I'm talking about just providing to the people around you. Making sure that your gift is talented. Making sure, child, that don't make sense. How you gonna make sure your gift talented? Making sure your gift is received by as many people as it needs to reach. So the provide quarter is definitely one of the most dear to me, because I feel like as we grow, we're now seeds to others. You know, when you think about a flower or a plant, when they grow, their seeds fall. So they don't just harbor their seeds with them. When they die, their seeds fall and they're planted, and you now are providing over and over again. Right? So it's important to be a provider. And then the last definition is to make adequate preparation for something. So when you provide, you're giving somebody else the adequate preparation that they need for it. Don't just get over that difficult situation and move on. You have to acknowledge that somebody else might be in that difficult situation. So it's up to you to provide them with what they need. Right? When we think about providing food for the homeless, you're giving them something that you need, whether or not you've been through it, but also showing empathy. So that's something we're going to talk about in that fourth quarter of life. But when we talk about providing, that's just important as planning. And all of these four things together, I feel like have created what I call the 4 quarters of focus. And as you move through life and move through different chapters and situations and different narratives and different relationships, these quarters will sometimes intertwine. And so what I'm realizing right now is that these 4 quarters of focus are not just an end all be all for one thing. And you're not just going to be in the same quarter of every phase and everything in your life. So, for example, I can be in quarter 1 planning for this platform, for my podcast, for my brand, for my business. I'm in a plan phase. But maybe when it comes to relationships, I'm in the produce phase. Right? I'm able to be who I need to be in a relationship. I'm ready to receive who I need to receive as a production of the work that I've done in previous relationships. Right? In my job, I might be in the provide stage. As a mom, I might be, well, I'm not a mom, but y'all be moms and stuff. But as a mom, you might be in the provide phase in motherhood. You know, in your career, you might be in the proceed phase. Right? I've studied enough. I'm in my senior year of college. It's now time for me to proceed and put these plans into action. It's time for me to now move into the world and put all of the things that I've studied into the world and into myself and into the community. Okay? So, I say all that to say these 4 quarters of focus are near and dear to me. We're going to be moving through them. We're going to be growing together. I'm going to be providing you all with some of the things and the tools that I need. I'm going to be providing you all with people who may be more astute than me in certain things, right? So this is going to be our 4 quarters of focus, and I cannot wait to see what that looks like for you. I can't wait to see what that looks like for us here at Universal Teas. For myself, it's a process. So let's get ready. Let's get ready to focus. See y'all next time. Bye.